So now we're going to further explore the importance of mindset. In this lecture, we're going to learn about growth, and we're going to learn about grit, and we're going to learn about goals. So the 3 G's, growth, grit, and goals, because these 3 things can really set the foundation for having a really wonderful mindset, which is going to help you achieve success in life. It's going to increase your likelihood and your probability that you're going to have an amazing life if you have the right mindset. And mindset is so important because the same event can happen, and it can be experienced by 2 different people or 10 different people or 100 million different people, and that same event can have a very different outcome and be experienced differently and be perceived differently by all of those different people. So let me just illustrate this for you. So imagine if there was somebody who didn't get a job, right? And so they didn't get the job, and people might think, one person might think, hey, this is awful, I didn't get the job, nobody wants me, I'm rejected, I'm a loser, I'm never gonna succeed, I'm never gonna win. That might be one person's perspective. Another person might think, hey, that's okay, I didn't get the job, that's all right, there are other opportunities. It takes, many different attempts before you actually land something, and maybe there are forces at work, benevolent forces at work out there in the universe. Apply whatever belief system you want to that, call it God, call it something else, right? Maybe there are benevolent forces out there in the universe that are guiding me towards the place that I need to be, and this isn't the one that was meant for me, and I'm gonna end up where I need to be, and that's coming, and it's gonna be here soon, and I'm gonna keep working and trying until I get there, because I know I need to put in that work, I know I need to put in that effort, but I'm being led somewhere else, and that's gonna be great. There's a great place that's out there for me, and I'm gonna find it. So notice those 2 different perspectives, right? And the only difference between those 2 different perspectives of the same event is mindset. One person could get totally crapped out about it, and one person could be, very optimistic and very positive and be very forward thinking and have a can-do attitude about it all. And each of those different perspectives, each of those different stories that each of those individuals are telling themselves greatly impacts the way they feel, and greatly impacts their life, and greatly impacts their chances of success, and greatly impacts their energy and their ability to keep moving forward and driving forward. And that's true for everything we experience in life, right? Like the other day, I was like, a couple things came up when I was trying to get out of the house. I'm like, man, I'm having a hard time getting out of the house. And I think I spilled something. And I could have been frustrated, I could have been mad, but then I was also like, well, maybe that was meant to happen. Maybe I needed to spill something because I needed to not get on the road 5 minutes ago. I needed to spend this 5 minutes cleaning this up so that I could avoid an accident. And maybe there's some divine force looking out for me, and this is all part of the program, and it all worked out for the best. I don't know, but even that story right there that I tell myself, it makes me feel better, right? It made me feel better because I was like, I wasn't mad at myself, I wasn't beating myself up. I was like, okay, maybe this was meant to be. And then I also, at that moment, thought of this phrase, fast is slow and slow is fast. So sometimes when I'm doing things fast, I'll knock something off a counter, and now I've been forced to slow down because I have to clean up the mess. So I was trying to go fast, but it actually made me go slower. And then other times, slow is fast, right? When you're slow, when you're smooth, when you're methodical, that's when you could really make progress because you're just like boom, boom, boom. You're not rushing, you're not making mistakes, and you're just continually making forward progress. So fast is slow and slow is fast is that phrase that also came to me in that moment. But the idea here is, what story are you telling yourself? What story are you telling yourself? And I mentioned earlier in the course, maybe it was this course, maybe it was my course at the college, that I loved stories, and I still love stories, and I loved that when I was young. I loved making documentaries, I wrote a bunch of books, and I love the power of stories to transform lives. I love the power of education to transform lives. But stories and education, transforming lives, stories are very powerful. Education's very powerful. But the power of stories is profound. It's immense. What are we telling ourselves? What are we telling ourselves? What stories are we telling ourselves? And the first step is to become aware that we're telling ourselves stories. The second step is to start to think about those stories. What is it, how does that story make me feel? Do I like that story? Is there another story I can tell myself? And then the third step is to start choosing skillful stories. Okay, that's one story, right? If your mind tells you something, tells you a story which is like hurts a little and doesn't feel good, and it kind of brings you down. You can say, okay, that's one story. Is there another story here that I could tell myself? Is there another mindset that I can adopt, which is going to make me feel better, which is going to make me feel more optimistic and give me more energy and help keep me positive? And you could look for that other story, and you could literally tell that story to yourself, either quietly in your own mind, or you could even articulate it out loud. Because when you speak it and when you hear it, you're activating different neural pathways in your brain, and you're using your brain more fully than if you just think it. So if you say it out loud, if you speak it out loud, it's more likely to start to ingrain that new way of thinking in your head. This is so powerful that the word abracadabra, if you look at the roots of that word, it comes from Hebrew or some other language, and I can't remember the exact words, but it's abracadabra or something like that, which means as I speak, so it is. Right? As I speak, so it is. Abracadabra, to bring something into existence like a magician. Abracadabra, here it is. To bring a new mindset into existence. Abracadabra, here it is. You speak it into existence. I speak, and so it is. Abracadabra. Right? So you could even start to speak those new stories out loud to yourself. You could say, that's okay. You're doing great. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody knocks something over sometime. Maybe this is needed, by the forces, the benevolent forces at work, guiding me to help prevent me from getting in a car accident, which I would have had if I'd left 5 minutes earlier. It's all right. You could say that stuff out loud to yourself, and you could feel, even in those words I just said right there, you could feel the difference that makes, right? Like it's a really nice, supportive, reassuring story. And if you say it out loud, if you hear it, you're activating new neural pathways, additional neural pathways than if you just think it. And being able to speak things into existence is so powerful. That's even how the Christian Bible begins. Now, I come from Western civilization, which is steeped in Christianity. My grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher. And so I'm steeped in that culture. My belief system is that I believe that all of the different belief systems in the world, if you look at them, there are beautiful, wonderful things in all of the world's belief systems, right? But in the Christian tradition, the beginning of the Bible, God speaks the world into existence. And I sometimes wonder if that's not a mistake, right? But we speak things into existence. God spoke the world into existence. And that's how the entire Christian religion, the beginning of that Bible, that's how it begins. And so we too can speak things into existence with our stories. What story are we telling ourselves? What is your mindset? Is it bringing you down? Is it making you feel bad? Or is it starting to make you, is it uplifting you? Is it making you positive? Is it making you want to move forward? Is it making you feel good about yourself? So really think about those stories that you're telling yourself. Listen for those stories. So become aware that you're telling yourself stories, right? And then start to think about those stories. Do you like that story? How does it make you feel? Is there another story that you can tell yourself? And then consciously choose to tell yourself a more skillful story. There are many perspectives between different people and also within ourselves, right? For every event that occurs, we could tell ourselves many different stories. We could have many different perspectives. And your mind is going to come up with a default perspective, a default story just right out of the gate. And once you hear that story, you can say, okay, that's one story. What's another story? What's another story that I could tell myself right now? And then tell yourself that story. Tell yourself a more skillful and positive and optimistic story that makes you feel better, right? And then that's going to eventually, over time, you're going to start to create new neural pathways, and those stories will start to become the default stories, and they'll replace the old stories which maybe weren't as helpful or as skillful, and which didn't make you feel as good, and which didn't give you that optimism and that energy and that enthusiasm. So, this is life, and this is the way the mind works, and this is how mindset works, right? And to cultivate a more skillful mindset, you have to consciously choose to do that, and this is the primary way that you do it, and you can also do it by immersing yourself in more skillful material, like this course, like this lecture, by gaining new knowledge, and becoming aware of what's possible and what you can do, and starting to be exposed to more positive mindset. You're already immersing yourself in a more skillful mindset, a more positive mindset. But you can listen to my courses, you can listen to my talks, you can also listen to other people talking about this. I really like Tony Robbins. I really like listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Be Useful, his book. I really liked Michael Singer and his two books, The Untethered Spirit or The Untethered Soul, and then also he did one on the Surrender Experiment. Both of those books were amazing. And listening to these other books, and particularly I like listening to them because I learn well that way, and we're going to learn more about the different learning styles as we go into this course. but I'll listen to those books while I'm driving. And so I'm immersing myself in more skillful mindsets. I'm hearing more skillful stories. I'm consciously choosing to do this. And now there'll be times where I sometimes will want to listen to like a band which has lyrics which aren't as skillful, right? But I'm aware that, okay, right now I'm just listening to this song because it pumps and it rocks and I'm mountain biking and it has lyrics which are kind of negative and not as skillful. You know, grain of salt, a little bit of moderation, digging the vibe of the song. Right? But I am also very much aware that I want to immerse my mind in skillful mindsets. I want to listen to skillful material. I want to read skillful material. And by also doing that, I'm further forwarding my mindset to be more skillful. So both being aware of the stories I tell myself and then consciously choosing to tell myself more skillful stories, and also immersing myself in the skillful mindset that other people forward and provide. Right? Those are two significant ways that you could enhance and create a better mindset for yourself. All right. So there's this great quote, and I forget who said this one. Maybe this one was Seneca, or maybe it was also Marcus Aurelius. But the quote is, "The soul becomes dyed. The soul becomes dyed in the color of its thoughts." So we could go to ChatGPT and we could say, "Who said the soul becomes dyed?" The soul becomes dyed in the color of its thoughts. Or maybe it was, the soul is steeped in the color of its thoughts, right? And so, you know, I'm going to go with the dyed one here and just copy that. And we'll let this run, but I'll also just search for this here. The soul becomes dyed in the color of its thoughts. And the source here is Marcus Aurelius. I love Marcus Aurelius. And so here also it's Marcus Aurelius. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And so just like cloth can become dyed if you dip it into dye and it'll become the color of whatever dye you dip it into, so too that's what's going to happen with your soul, your spirit, your life, right? And what you think, right, is what you become. So mind is the forerunner of all things. This is another great quote that I like. Mind is the forerunner of all things. As you think and act, so your life becomes. And so you want to become conscious of your mindset. You want to become conscious of the stories you're telling yourself. Then you want to think about those stories and you want to see, how are those stories making you feel? Do you like that story? Is there another story you could tell yourself? And then choose to tell yourself that more skillful story and say it out loud, speak it out loud, abracadabra, speak it into existence, speak it and hear it. And that's one of the most important things you could do to cultivate a more skillful mindset. And then the other important thing you could do to cultivate a skillful mindset is to steep your mind in positive, skillful mindsets that others have provided, right? Because the soul becomes dyed in the color of its thoughts. So that's doing your growth mindset, cultivating a skillful mindset. And there's this entire idea about growth mindset. And growth mindset, the idea of growth mindset, this phrase, growth mindset, comes from Carol Dweck. And she wrote a book about it. And growth mindset is that you can grow, you can change, you can become more skillful. And so that's part of having a skillful mindset, is knowing that you can grow, that you have this growth mindset. That growth is possible as part of your mindset. So that's the growth mindset. And then you want to have grit. Life is a journey. It's effort. It's going uphill. Sometimes it's walking through meadows. Sometimes it's resting by lakes, but then it's going uphill and climbing again, right? And that's how you rise, and that's how you get higher, metaphorically speaking, right? You're going to higher and higher levels of consciousness, of skillfulness, of abilities, of wealth, of all of that, right? You have to have grit. You have to keep going. So you need a skillful mindset. And part of your skillful mindset is that you have a growth mindset, that growth is possible, and you have grit and you're working towards it and you keep going and you have balance. So sometimes you chill by the lake, but then you're like, let's get on with the next challenge and climb that next mountain and go even higher. And then you also have goals. So grit, growth, and goals. You have goals. I'm going to get my bachelor's. And you could have long-term goals, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and you could have short-term goals. I'm knocking it out of the park this semester with these 5 classes. I'm going to get A's in these 5 classes. That's my short-term goal. You could have shorter-term goals. Today I'm going to exercise. It's one of 3 times a week that I exercise. Then I'm going to study for 4 hours. And while I study, I'm going to do sit-ups and push-ups. I'm going to study in bursts, right? You're going to learn all of this going through the course. So you could have long-term goals and short-term goals. And part of that could be enhanced by a to-do list and also by this concept of what's my next best step. Today, after my class of the college got out, I was like, my next best step is to come back here and record these lectures. And then after that, I've got my next best steps lined up, including for me today, exercise at 5:20. So I'm going to have to cut out of here pretty soon. All right, so that's the mindset for success. You need to have a skillful mindset, which includes the growth mindset. You need to have goals, and you need to have grit.